Hi everyone, I'm that guy who keeps on appearing on YouTube recommended for no particular reason, offering answers to archery questions you never knew you had. Now, in light of my video trending again, I'm going to address some of the more common misunderstandings and misconceptions which have arisen from people who have been exposed to especially modern archery for the first time. One of the controversies which have appeared is the notion of modern technology or modern tools making archery easier. And the question raised is, does it actually make it easier? In the spirit of provide the answer straight away, the answer is no, these modern tools don't make archery easier. What they do is increase the maximum potential accuracy. Within the archery community, whether it's modern or traditional, it's generally understood and agreed that a modern archer with a modern bow is going to demonstrate precision over long distance to a greater extent than someone shooting a traditional bow. There's really no argument about this, but it tends to be from the non-archers or people who don't shoot bows or don't shoot archery, who like to hypothesize that someone shooting one of these bows should be able to be just as accurate as someone shooting a modern bow. That unfortunately is actually not the case. Firstly, let's qualify what we mean by shooting accurately. Many people will say that seeing someone shoot a traditional longbow or any historical bow is more impressive than watching someone shooting modern bows with modern tools. And I agree, it is more impressive if they achieve the same results. This is where this ambiguous familiarity can interfere and distort your view of archery and how good people are. When you look at archery at short distances, say 10 meters to 30 meters, or for Americans, 20 yards to 40 yards, it actually isn't that far apart. Many people who are very good barebow shooters and very good traditional shooters can shoot very accurately at short distance, almost competing against a modern shooter who is of average skill level. Where things really separate is when you get to 50 meters plus, especially at the Olympic distance of 70 meters. The traditional barebow shooters don't go anywhere near the accuracy and consistency of a modern shooter. We're talking about hundreds of points apart. This can be seen in the current standing world records and national records. And bear in mind, these records are considering the modern recurve and modern barebow, which is basically modern recurve without the long rod stabilisers inside. So it's a spirit of shooting barebow, but with modern equipment. And within these disciplines, the scores are hundreds of points apart for national records. So the best shooters of this style in the world don't go anywhere near a modern recurve shooter. And this is even going towards the traditional historical bows. They are, again, way below even modern barebow. Now, as you get to closer distances, especially indoor distances, which as a standard is 18 meters or 20 yards, the scores become much closer. So a good traditional barebow shooter should be able to go head-to-head with a recurve shooter at an indoor distance. But with the original intended outdoor distance, that's where things really separate. Point being is that the standards are incredibly different. As much as you would like to hypothesize that someone with the Robin Hood touch can shoot one of these bows and compete in the Olympic Games, that's never happened, and it's unlikely to happen. Fact is, no person who has shot a standard Olympic qualifying round has met the minimum score to qualify for the Olympics using one of these bows. So if you're comparing a historical bow or a traditional bow like this longbow with a modern recurve and you think, well, this is better, fair enough. Just bear in mind that you should also compare these two to the same standard if you're claiming one is more impressive than the other. Otherwise, you're basically making the argument that using a less accurate tool for inferior results is better than a modern precision tool for better results. The reality is that if you compare a good longbow shooter and a good recurve shooter and you test their proficiency at 70 meters, the recurve shooter will always outshoot the longbow shooter. A good longbow shooter can expect perhaps one bullseye every 10 or 20 shots at 70 meters. A good recurve shooter can expect to get that bullseye perhaps 80 to 90% of the time. Now here's the part which really threw people off. Obviously, the modern recurve is an easier bow to use because you can shoot more accurately. What people miss is that the bow allows you to shoot more accurately, but it doesn't do it for you. To answer another common question, why use all these tools if it doesn't make shooting easier? People use these tools to be more precise. It increases maximum potential accuracy. Achieving that maximum potential accuracy, it requires years of training and practice and experience. The biggest assumption and misconception is that the bow does it for the archer. That's what makes it easier. And the reality is that no, it doesn't. It doesn't automate any part of the process, not any more than what people have traditionally done. When you see Olympic shooters on TV always hitting that gold, remember, these are the world's best. They spent years training for this one particular purpose. So yes, you expect them to be very good. But if you assume that the bow makes everything easier, that would imply that anyone can pick up one of these bows and shoot to the same standard as these Olympic shooters. And they don't. Now, if you have this experience of shooting a modern bow and drilling 10s at 70 meters, then please feel free to share your experience and your world records. But unless you've actually done it, you don't really know how hard it is to actually use one of these bows. Now, critics have said things like, the sight aims for you. No, it doesn't. The sight doesn't aim for you. It's a reference point. The archer uses it as a mark to determine where to aim. They have to set the sight based on what they've established over months and years of practice. The sight doesn't tell the archer where to aim. The archer sets the sight to tell themselves where to aim. And if using a reference point is cheating to you, then remember, archers have always used reference points. Now, there are some styles which are primarily instinctive. Fair enough, that's more muscle memory and reflex based. But for any form of aimed shooting or target shooting, archers have always tried to find ways to have a consistent reference point. Often it's the tip of the arrow, and they'll measure how far it is from the target, above or below. They might use a marking on the bow. Traditional styles like Turkish archery use the knuckles as a reference point. They might use an object in the background as a reference point. There are always ways in which people will try to figure out a way to aim. Aiming is a part of a precision sport. And the fact of the matter is, a sight is a natural evolution of a natural aiming method. Only difference is the sight is more precise and easy to calibrate, whereas the methods of aiming used are vaguer and harder to get right every single time. Even tools like the clicker, which supposedly tells archers exactly where to draw back, aren't without historical precedence. Styles like Chinese archery document that to get the right draw length, the arrow was cut down to be exactly that length, and the archer would feel the point of the arrow on their thumb to indicate they're at the same length. So again, same idea, same principle, but the modern tools make it more precise. Ultimately, when it comes to getting an arrow on target, it comes down to two things: knowing where to aim and executing the shot. If you know where to aim based on your markings or your sight or your memory, then you've got half the equation down. The other part is the part which is not automated, and that is the technique, release, and execution. Now, an argument can be made that bows like crossbows and to a lesser extent compound bows do automate part of this process, and yes, they do. Crossbows are basically like guns. You hold the stock and you point the crossbow at the target and you push the trigger. Compound bows, there's a bit more manual input, but the compound bow by design holds most of the weight for the archer. You have a trigger release, so there are more elements which are replaced by mechanical aids. That's fair enough, and it is true that someone starting from scratch can achieve a much higher level of accuracy with a compound bow and a crossbow within a short period of time. So there is an ease of use element. But for a modern recurve bow, that generally isn't the case. In fact, from my experience as an instructor and a coach, if you give people a modern recurve bow with sights and stabilisers, they generally shoot worse than how they started with a basic recurve. That's because they have to spend time to train to use the tools with the same precision and consistency to achieve the results that they are capable of. And what this highlights is a difference in mentality. For archers, we look at the process. For non-archers or spectators, they look at the results. Hence this fascination with how many bullseyes can you hit, or how many things can you shoot instinctively, compared to how consistently something is done. When we watch replays or Olympic Games, we look at technique and process. What they actually do, we kind of assume and we can guess based on what they've done. But the spectator only sees the results. And if you're looking only at the results, what you see is that, yeah, this looks really easy because everyone shoots really well. What you don't see is the journey, the years, the hours spent on the range, training every day to get that perfection right. If these modern bows were truly designed to be easier to use, then an unskilled user should be able to be just as good as a very skilled traditional shooter. That isn't the case. Believe me, there are people in my club who spent years shooting one of these bows and they still miss the target at 40 or 50 meters. Success and accuracy is not guaranteed. The final argument I present in response to this being easier is that if modern bows remove the skill of archery, why is there still a skill gap? Why is there a difference between a very skilled shooter who always hits gold versus a novice shooter? If this truly automates archery, then it wouldn't matter who is using it because the bow is doing the work. The user has the input, the user drives the shot, the user controls their own destiny. Just as an archer wouldn't credit the bow for their successes, they wouldn't blame the bow if the shot goes bad. It is them. In conclusion, just because something is purposely designed for precision sport shooting doesn't mean that it is automatically going to be more accurate or easier to use. The pathway to become competent and proficient is the same for both styles of archery. If you don't like modern bows because they're too modern and technical, fair enough, a lot of people agree with you. If you want to use one of these historical bows or traditional bows, then use them. They're really fun to use. But if you're arguing that this makes archery easy and we should use old-fashioned bows for the Olympic Games, that's basically like saying that we should have a modern rifle competition using only muzzle-loading muskets. While I've danced around using the term ease in several videos, I don't like using it because people will see archery differently. Some will see the result only, some will see the process and appreciate the process. I've used this kind of bow for 7-8 years now, and I'm nowhere near the level of the Olympic archers. It is not easy to attain. It requires a lot of commitment, dedication, and training. The people who do make it to Olympic level, and I've had the pleasure to meet and shoot alongside these people, spend 4 or 5 days a week shooting. They have the same commitment as someone shooting a traditional bow who's very passionate about it. So if you're willing to put in the time, you're going to achieve great results. But nothing is given to you. Anyway, I hope that's clarified a few misconceptions. Even if you disagree with me, hopefully to open your mind up and make you think about your archery in a different way. If you haven't done archery before and you're just judging this based on what you think archery should be, give archery a shot, seriously. Whether it's modern or traditional, archery is a lot harder than it looks. It's a lot more fun than it looks too. It's not a spectator sport. It's not meant to be super exciting for someone on TV. It is super exciting when you do it yourself. So instead of spending time hammering on a keyboard and arguing which is better, do it. That's what I did. Remember, I do modern archery, I do historical archery and traditional archery, and they're all amazing, they're all fun. To me, there's no argument, there's no this is easier or this is easier. They all have pros and cons, and people do them for different reasons. And again, if you think that something is easier, then try it yourself first and then make a judgment. Anyway, this is NUSensei. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.